The last time Isabella truly smiled was the very night her husband plotted to have her killed. Isabella Hayes, 29, always thought happiness was a well-deserved reward after years of struggle. She was born in a neighborhood where poverty wasn't the exception, but the everyday landscape. The daughter of an absent mother and an alcoholic father who preferred to lose himself in cheap bottles rather than face life, she grew up watching the world from a broken window, hungry for something more than just food. Her childhood was a collection of gray days and long nights. She dreamed of a better life, not one of luxury, but of peace, of love. And when she met Julian Delano, she believed all those dreams were finally knocking at her door. Julian was 39, and behind his impeccable suits and charismatic smile hid one of high society's best-kept secrets. He was a real estate tycoon, owner of hotel chains and exclusive coastal properties. To the press, he was a self-made man. To others, he was the perfect husband. And to Isabella, at first, he was her salvation. They met at a charity event. She was working as a waitress, and he arrived accompanied by a famous actress he ignored all evening. Isabella served him wine with trembling hands, and Julian was quick to notice the fragility in her dark eyes. He offered her his card, a dinner, a promise. In less than 6 months, they were married. A beach wedding, a honeymoon in the Bahamas, a home decorated by Italian designers. Everything was perfect, or so it seemed. The mansion they lived in was cold, perfect for photos, but soulless. The walls had no history. The garden was always flawless, but no one ever touched it, not even her. Julian had built a life where everything was under control, even feelings. He said he loved Isabella, but he dressed her as if she were his personal doll. He bought her clothes, chose her colors, her shoes, her hairstyles. At first, she mistook it for affection. Then she understood it was just another form of confinement. "Wear this. It makes you look sophisticated," he said one morning, leaving a simple dress with gold details on the bed. "I don't like that color. I feel a bit dull in it," she replied in a low voice, as if asking for permission to think. "It's not about what you like, ISA. It's about the message it sends. A woman like you has to represent elegance, not vulgarity," he said, looking at her with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. That was the first time Isabella felt that something wasn't right. The second was when she discovered the calls. They were cryptic conversations, names she didn't know, and late-night calls Julian denied answering. He had also forbidden her from opening a room on the 3rd floor. "What's up there, Julian?" she asked one afternoon while they had coffee on the terrace. "Documents, business. Nothing you need to worry about," he replied without looking up from his newspaper. "I'm your wife. I should know what you're doing. And you're my wife because you know when to stay silent. Don't change that." Isabella swallowed, forcing a smile. That night she cried silently into her pillow while Julian slept with the calm breathing of a man who believes he has everything under control. It was Charlotte, her younger sister, who planted the first seed of doubt in her heart. Charlotte was 25 and had lived alone since she was 18. She worked as a freelance makeup artist and never trusted Julian. "Why are you always so quiet, ISA? When did you stop laughing like you used to?" "I'm just tired. That's all," Isabella replied on one of her few outings without an escort. "Tired or scared? Because I see a woman who doesn't recognize her own reflection. And that's not love." The conversation was brief. Julian had called 3 times. Isabella had to go back, and although she said goodbye to her sister with a hurried kiss, a doubt began to form like a shadow within her. Days later, the shadow became a scream. While organizing her walk-in closet, she found a hidden envelope among shirts she never wore. Inside were bank documents in the name of a certain Lucia Cabrera, a woman who had died 3 years ago under unclear circumstances. The account was still active. Recent movements, transfers to shell corporations. Isabella felt the world tremble under her feet. She tried to stay calm, but her hands were shaking as she put the documents back. That night, she didn't sleep and feigned a headache. Julian watched her in silence. The next morning was worse. "Where were you last night?" Isabella asked as he adjusted his tie. "Working. A last-minute meeting. You didn't come into the room until 3 in the morning. I saw you from the window. You're spying on me, ISA. You shouldn't be." The silence was her punishment. He approached and caressed her face with forced tenderness. "I love you, ISA, but sometimes you forget who you are in this house." And he left. That same afternoon, Isabella decided to enter the 3rd floor room. She forced the lock. Inside, she found shelves full of folders, photos of properties in other countries, and fake passports. But the most terrifying thing was a notebook of notes, Names, dates, amounts, illegal businesses, money laundering, and at the bottom, an underlined name. Valerie Swanson, Identity B. Isabella's heart was beating so fast she didn't hear Julian enter the house. She just managed to get out, hide the notebook under her clothes, and pretend to be asleep on the couch. Hours later, while they were having wine, Julian looked at her with a soft expression, as if everything were normal. "I've been thinking we need a break, some time for ourselves. No phones, no stress. What do you say we go to the cabin in the mountains this weekend? Just you and me like the old days. You and me away from the noise." Isabella felt fear crawl up her spine. She knew Julian was already suspicious, and now he was isolating her. But she had to pretend. She had to survive. "Sounds good," she said with a forced smile. That night, she called Charlotte from a public phone. She gave her the notebook, asked her to hide it, to protect it with her life, and told her something Charlotte would never forget. "If I don't come back, you'll know what to do." 2 days later, they traveled to the cabin. Julian was more loving than ever. He cooked for her, brought her wildflowers, played music she liked. It was everything she had ever wanted, but it was too late. "I love you, Isa. We can start over. Just you and me. Away from the noise." She looked at him. She didn't respond. She just nodded. That night, while pretending to be asleep, she heard him talking on the phone in a low, almost whispering voice. "It's ready. Do it tonight." Time seemed to freeze. Isabella opened her eyes without moving. Her body was trembling inside. She knew if she ran, she would die. If she spoke, she would die. She had only one option: to wait until the very last second. The minutes passed. The silence was thick. Outside, crickets chirped as if everything were normal. And then the cabin door creaked. A shadow entered. Isabella barely caught a metallic glint. Then everything was darkness, a gunshot. Silence. A fade to black. The gunshot broke the night like a dry lightning strike. The cabin, enveloped in shadows, returned to a dense silence, as if the forest itself was holding its breath. Isabella's body lay motionless on the wooden floor. The hitman didn't stop to check. He just picked up the gun with gloved hands. He made sure the blood stained the rug, a clean, direct scene with no witnesses, and left without a word. Outside, Julian waited in his SUV with the engine running and an empty expression on his face. The killer nodded, and Julian lit a cigarette. "It's done," the man replied without looking at him. The SUV drove off into the night, swallowed by the road as if nothing had happened. At dawn, Isabella's body was not where it had fallen. A stray dog was the first to find her, sniffing the blood as if it recognized human pain. Then a figure appeared among the trees, a man with a long beard, worn clothes, and broken boots. He walked slowly, a machete at his waist, and an ancient look in his eyes. His name was Old Man Roman, and he lived alone in an old shack 3 miles from the last town visible on a map. When he saw the woman, he thought she was dead. The shot had not been direct. The bullet had grazed her skull, leaving her unconscious at the brink of death. Roman lifted her without hesitation, murmuring words no one heard. "You're still breathing. You're a stubborn fool, but you're alive." He took her to his house, laid her on an old mattress, cleaned the wound, applied alcohol, and improvised a bandage. For 2 days, she didn't open her eyes, and then she just muttered things that made no sense. Meanwhile, in the city, the news opened their morning broadcasts with the tragedy of the year. "We regret to report the passing of Isabella Delano, wife of entrepreneur Julian Delano, who was found dead in a remote cabin." The authorities' main theory was suicide due to severe depression. Julian appeared on television with what seemed like sincere tears, speaking of his love, his pain, and the sadness of seeing his wife fall into a hole from which she could not escape. People consoled him on social media. Some called him brave, others a martyr. "I never thought the love of my life would choose to give up like this," he said to the cameras with a broken voice. The press swallowed the story hook, line, and sinker. No journalist questioned it. No one asked why there was no public autopsy, why the body was cremated so quickly, or why Charlotte Hayes, the deceased sister, was not seen at the funeral. That's because Charlotte could no longer speak. She knew. She had the notebook. She had the truth, and was ready to scream it to the world. She tried to. She contacted an investigative journalist, arranging to meet at a coffee shop, but she never made it. She was intercepted by 2 men in white who spoke kindly, and put her in an ambulance. They said it was for her own good. Hours later, Charlotte woke up in a metal bed, tied hand and foot, with a psychiatrist watching her from a corner. Acute psychotic episode with persecutory delusions. The doctor noted while she screamed that her sister wasn't dead, that Julian was a killer. The clinic she was admitted to was private, with tall walls and well-paid doctors. No one went in without permission. No one got out. Julian took care of everything, even the medication. In the mountains, old man Roman watched the sleeping woman every day. He didn't ask about her story, but he sensed it. He knew that fear. He had seen it before in his daughter's eyes before they killed her. You look like her. The same face of someone who hasn't finished her story. Isabella opened her eyes after 15 days. She didn't say anything, just looked at the ceiling, then at the man next to her, then at her own hands. She didn't recognize anything. Not her face, not the place, not even her name. Who am I? Roman sat beside her. His voice was deep but gentle. Today it doesn't matter what your name is. Today it matters that you're breathing. The memory, that's also part of being alive. Isabella cried in silence. Thick, heavy tears, not for what she remembered, but for what she couldn't. Old man Roman brought her lentil soup, warm water, a blanket. For the next few days, he avoided asking questions. He talked to her about the fields, the corn, the rain. He taught her how to build a fire, to boil plants, to distinguish the birds' songs. He called her Valerie, a strong name just like you. She accepted it. She had no reason to reject it. Every now and then she had nightmares. She saw a face in the shadows. She heard shots, screams, the sound of footsteps, but when she woke up, it all disappeared. I feel broken, she told him one afternoon while Roman cooked on an improvised stove. You're bent, not broken. The pieces are still there. You just need the courage to put them together. She looked at her hands. They were full of new scars. Some still hurt. Weeks passed. The wound on her head healed, but her mind was still full of holes. She learned to help in the garden. She began to walk further. She started to smile, even just a little. One night, while they watched the fire, Roman confessed his story. My daughter's name was Angela. She was your age when she got married. Her husband was handsome, kind in public, but at home, he was a beast. Valerie listened in silence. One night, he beat her to death. He said it was an accident. The police didn't investigate. I looked for him, but I never found him. I came here to hide from a world that stinks of injustice. She took his hand. She said nothing, but her eyes spoke volumes. Maybe you don't remember who you are, Roman murmured. But the pain in your eyes is from someone who has known death and returned. That night, while she slept, a memory broke through the wall. She saw the cabin, she saw Julian, she saw him grab his phone. She heard his voice, his order, his betrayal. It's ready. Do it tonight. Isabella sat up, screaming, her eyes wide open, gasping as if she had just emerged from a tomb. He was going to kill me. Roman ran to her, held her in his arms. Easy, daughter, easy. He shot me. Or he sent someone. He wanted to kill me. Who? I don't know, but I wasn't dead. They shot me and left me there as if I were garbage. She cried until she had no voice left. Outside, the full moon illuminated the trees. The forest seemed to hold its breath. Inside that wooden shack, a broken woman was beginning to rebuild herself. She was no longer called Valerie, she was no longer called Isabella. She was something new, something no one yet understood, not even her. But one thing she did know. She was alive, and the truth still needed to be told. Even if it cost her blood, the fire crackled. The war was just beginning. Isabella was no longer the same woman who had fallen to the floor of that cabin, bleeding, broken, surrendered. That woman had died. The one who now breathed, thought, and walked barefoot on the forest paths was someone else. No more victim. No more silence. Her face was still marked by the wound. A thin line crossed her scalp, hidden under her hair like a warning tattoo. You were at the edge, but you came back. Old man Roman looked at her with a mix of pride and fear. He knew she wouldn't stay much longer. He saw it in the way she looked at the horizon, as if there was something far away that she needed to destroy. You shouldn't go back, he told her as they broke bread on the wooden table. You have no idea what that man is capable of. That's why I have to go back, she replied firmly. Roman watched her in silence. I saved you, girl, but if you go back unprepared, he will finish killing you. He already tried and he failed. The next morning, Isabella left. She carried a backpack with some old clothes, a folder with notes she had written in recent days, and a fake ID that Roman helped her get through a friend who still owed him favors from the past. Now she was Valerie Swanson, with sealed papers, a social security number, and even a fabricated medical history. Roman gave her his blessing with a barely audible whisper. Go, but don't forget who you are and never, ever lose the rage. Valerie nodded, took the first bus at dawn, and left the mountains behind. When she arrived in the city, the first thing she felt was disgust. Advertisements for Julian on billboards. Faces of corrupt politicians smiling next to children they didn't know. Garbage trucks spewing filth. Women running on impossible schedules, people walking without looking each other in the eye. She rented a room in a cheap motel where no one asked questions. The bed smelled of dampness, and the walls were so thin she could hear every word from the couple arguing in the next room. But she didn't complain. She was alive, and she had a plan. For weeks she posed as a journalist. She approached women's collectives, associations looking for missing persons, mothers with signs in the squares. She listened to their stories, took notes, recorded audio. She told them she was part of a documentary project called Voices and Names. The name hurt her like an open wound, because she too was a voice no one had heard. It was at a protest that she discovered it. They were passing in front of a courthouse when a woman screamed something that made her soul shudder. Delano is also behind this. He funds the clinics where they make our daughters disappear. Valerie approached. What did you say? That man, Julian Delano, put money into a supposed rehab network, but that's where they put the women who speak out, the inconvenient ones. They drug them, they take them off the map. My sister was there, and now no one knows where she is. Her heart hammered against her chest like a war drum. Julian hadn't just wanted to kill her. He was involved in something much deeper, something that wasn't just about her. It was something systemic, structured, a network. That same night, Valerie began to record interviews. In her room, she had turned a closet into an improvised editing studio. With a borrowed camera, she filmed women with similar stories. Each testimony was a collective scar. She discovered that Julian had invested in a set of front foundations. One of them had connections to psychiatric clinics where inconvenient patients disappeared. The name of one clinic was repeated several times: St. Gabriel's Integrated Health Clinic. When she looked up its address, a chill ran down her spine. It was the same clinic where, in her old life, Julian said they took extreme cases. And that's when she thought of her sister, Charlotte. She had left her with the notebook. She hadn't heard from her since. No calls, no sign. She looked on social media, in records, in medical directories. Nothing. Until a woman handed her a piece of paper, a handwritten message. Valerie, if you're reading this, it's because I managed to get this note out. I'm alive. They have me locked up. I know you're alive, too. I swear he will pay for this. ISA. Charlotte. The paper was folded inside an envelope that had arrived at the headquarters of a foundation addressed to a certain Valerie Swanson with the phrase, "Witness from the woods." Only someone very clever would have known how to connect those dots. Isabella sat on the bed, trembling. Charlotte was alive, confined, possibly tortured, maybe drugged. He won't touch her, not her too. That day, she swore she wouldn't rest until she got her out, but she couldn't do it alone. It was in the middle of that search that she met Matthew. He was a doctor, but not a typical one. He had the look of a man who had seen too much. He worked at a free clinic on weekends. On one occasion, while Valerie was interviewing a mother who had lost her daughter due to a covered-up medical negligence, Matthew interrupted, annoyed by the tone of the interview. "Not all clinics are the same," he said, with contained tension in his voice. "And whose side are you on?" Valerie responded without turning around. "The one with the dirty conscience," he said before leaving. "So, I guess I'm on your side." She followed him. That night, they confronted each other in a coffee shop in a discussion that ended in an unexpected silence. He ended up confessing something he hadn't said in years. "I worked for Delano. I was part of his medical foundation. We operated without permits. There were girls who came in with signs of abuse, and they forced us to keep quiet. I signed documents, falsified diagnoses, but when I saw what they were doing at St. Gabriel's Clinic, I left, and I've been running ever since." She said nothing for several minutes. Then she extended her hand. "Then help me expose him. Help me get them out of there." Matthew looked at her as if he were looking in a mirror. He nodded. For the next few weeks, they worked together. He provided contacts, access to internal files. She recorded, put the story together, wove the narrative. Together, they infiltrated the clinic network systems. They stole files, discovered lists of names, and in one of them, Valerie felt the world collapse. Sebastian Delano, born July 15th. Private status, legal guardian, Julian Delano. It was her son, the one they had told her was stillborn. He was alive, and Julian had hidden him all this time. The folder contained his medical history, a blurry photo, growth reports. The boy was now 7 years old. He had been registered as the only son of Julian Delano and a deceased mother. Isabella screamed, threw everything on the floor, and fell to her knees. Matthew tried to hold her, but she crumpled like a leaf in a storm. "He took my son, ISA," he murmured without thinking. "ISA, look at me. We're going to get him back. I swear." She lifted her head. Her eyes burned red, savage. "No, don't swear. I don't want promises, I want justice." Matthew handed her one more file. It was a recording. In it, Julian appeared in a meeting, talking in a low voice. "Make sure the girl is medicated. The sister is already neutralized, and that boy, can never know who his mother was." Isabella gritted her teeth. "He's going to fall for Charlotte, for Sebastian, for all of us." The war was no longer beginning. It was personal now, and she didn't intend to lose. The echo of that phrase pounded against her chest as she walked down the motel hallway, the trembling documents in her hand. The photos of her son Sebastian were blurry but unmistakable. The curve of his cheeks, his dark eyes, so similar to hers. He was 7 years old. He had lived those years under the same roof as Julian. Julian had raised him as his own. He had told him a false story, a lie the boy surely believed was the truth. Isabella locked herself in her room without turning on the light. Only the blue glow of the monitor illuminated her face. She couldn't stop looking at the folder, the medical history, the legal signatures, her son's name stained by the Delano surname. Matthew entered without knocking, his face pale. He was holding a bottle of water, but seeing the scene, he didn't dare say anything. He sat beside her and carefully touched her shoulder. "Are you sure it's him?" "I knew it as soon as I saw his eyes." "He's mine, Matthew. That boy is mine. They stole him from me. They declared him dead. Julian lied to me from the beginning. You have no idea what that means. If this goes public, Julian can crush everything. He's not going to. Not again. This time, I'm the one who's going to hit first." The next morning, Matthew used his contacts at the county records office. He paid for confidential information. He discovered the exact address where Sebastian lived. A mansion in the city's most exclusive area, owned by Mrs. Beatrice Delano. The name left a sour taste in her mouth. She remembered her as a woman of ice, with an arrogant gaze and a dead smile. Julian's mother, always silent, always distant. She never showed any affection to Isabella, not even at family events, as if from the very first day she knew Isabella wouldn't last long. When she learned that Sebastian was living with her, she understood many things. Julian didn't want the boy out of love. He wanted him as a trophy, a pawn to keep under control, just as he had done with her, just as he did with everyone. Isabella decided to see her. She disguised herself with a brown wig, large glasses, and a maid's uniform. She entered as part of the service staff, attending a charity party organized by the Delano Foundation. It was her only chance. Matthew got the credentials. She got the courage. The mansion was lit up like a church at a festival. Hanging lights, classical music, women in long dresses, and men with wine glasses pretending to care about causes they didn't. She slipped among them like a shadow until she saw him. Sebastian was running in the garden with other children. He was wearing a white shirt and a navy blue sweater. He was laughing. He was free, and at the same time, he was trapped in a lie as big as the house he lived in. Isabella didn't move. She watched him from a distance. Every second was a pang in her heart. She wanted to run to him, hug him, scream that his mom was alive, but she couldn't. Not there, not in that place, not surrounded by cameras, by enemies, by eyes that watched everything. A hand rested on her back. "I haven't seen that look in a long time," a harsh voice said. Isabella turned. It was Mrs. Beatrice. Her heart almost stopped. The woman was looking at her coldly, but without surprise. "Relax. I know who you are." Isabella said nothing. "I also know you're not dead or crazy, although your husband would wish you were. Why don't you tell him you saw me? Because you are the least of his problems now, and because I'm tired of protecting a monster." Isabella's lips tightened. Beatrice guided her to a corner of the garden, away from prying eyes. "My son was a beast from a young age. He was violent, controlling, cruel. When I confronted him, he took everything I had. He left me in charge of the boy because he knew that with me, he would be safe for now. Did you know he shot me? Not for sure. But I always knew you wanted to leave and that he wouldn't allow it. Why didn't you do anything?" Beatrice looked at her with sadness. "Because I'm a coward. Because I thought I couldn't beat him. And because sometimes silence seems like the only place where a woman can survive." Isabella took a deep breath. Every word was a weight on her back. "I want my son. I know. I'm going to get him out of here. Then do it right. No scandals, no mistakes, because if Julian discovers you're alive, he won't fail twice. At that moment, a round of applause interrupted them. Julian had just arrived. Black suit, a shark-like smile, he walked as if the world belonged to him. Isabella hid behind a column. Her body was trembling, but not from fear, from fury. She was just 15 feet away from the man who buried her alive, and he didn't even know it. "I can't stay any longer," she murmured. "I have to leave before he sees me. Go through the service entrance. No one will stop you." "Thank you," Isabella said, her voice cracking. "Don't thank me. Just end this and save yourself too." Isabella left through the kitchen with her face covered, breathing in short gasps. Matthew was waiting for her in the car, nervous. "Did you see him?" "Yes. And I also talked to his mother. Beatrice knows the truth, and she's fed up with him." That night, back at the motel, Isabella broke down crying for Sebastian, for the lost time, for the life that was stolen from her. Matthew hugged her without saying a word. In another part of the city, Julian sat in his office, drinking whiskey. There was something that didn't feel right, a sensation. "Did you feel that?" he asked his assistant as if the air had changed. "Like someone was here, but I couldn't see her." "What do you mean?" "I don't know, but she's close." The next day, Julian received an anonymous link in his private email. When he clicked on it, a video began to play. A female voice narrated a story about missing women, silenced abuse, psychiatric techniques used as prisons, and influence peddling. Julian's face appeared on screen along with documents, names, signatures, records, and at the end, the voice pronounced his name. "I was one of them. My name is Valerie Swanson, and I'm alive." Julian shot up, spilling his glass. "It's her," he whispered. "She's alive." His face changed. It was no longer that of a grieving widower. It was that of a hunter who had just seen the shadow of his prey, and now the hunt would begin. Julian didn't scream or break anything. He just sat in his office with his eyes fixed on the frozen screen, on that exact second where the woman in the video, that Valerie Swanson, pronounced his name with the calm of someone who has returned from hell. He barely moved a finger and dialed a number he had saved as L. "She's alive," he said without preamble. "Are you sure?" The cadence, the tremor at the end of the phrase, "It's her. There's no doubt. Find her." He hung up and poured himself another drink. This time he drank the whiskey straight, without ice. He didn't savor it, he swallowed it like poison. In his mind, the pieces were realigning. His plan, absolute control, the narrative he had built, everything was crumbling. And what hurt him most wasn't the risk of losing it all. It was the humiliation, the fact that she had survived his shot, that she had deceived him with a fake death. It devoured him. Julian knew no limits or forgiveness. The first thing he did was to trace the digital connections of the video. He had hackers on the payroll, programmers who knew how to erase and hunt. It took them 3 hours to trace the IP to a public network of a downtown feminist foundation. Julian smiled. He knew it wasn't a mistake. He knew she had done it to provoke him. "You're brave and stupid," he whispered. The next clue led him to the past, Old Man Roman. One of his men had gotten a filtered photo from one of the foundation's cameras. In the background, behind one of the interviewees, was a familiar shadow, that of the old man who lived near the cabin. The same man who had legal trouble years ago for assaulting a man who was beating his wife. Julian didn't think twice. He got in his car and drove to the rural area where he had almost killed her. The forest was denser than before. The midday heat felt like punishment on the windshield. Roman's shack was still standing. Broken old, but alive, just like him. Roman opened the door without surprise. "I knew you would come," he said without fear. "Where is she?" "Who? Don't play games with me." Roman looked at him with a hatred he hadn't been able to use when his daughter was killed. "You should kill yourself and do yourself a favor, but not her." "I'm not going to turn her in." "You don't have to," Julian said and threw an envelope with a photo at him. "I already know she's Valerie Swanson, and I already know where she lives, but I want you to know something. If you talk, if you breathe her name again, your corpse will be as invisible as your daughter's." Roman clenched his fists, his face red, his lips tight. A buzzing started in his chest. Julian turned away, satisfied. He walked toward his car. Before getting in, he stopped. "Oh, and tell her son doesn't ask about her anymore." 5 minutes after the car's engine disappeared into the vegetation, Roman fell to his knees. His left arm went rigid. His heart pounded as if someone were hitting his chest with a stone. He tried to reach the table. He failed. The heart attack was quick, but not quick enough to prevent him from leaving a letter. 2 days later, that letter reached Isabella's hands. Matthew had picked it up at a small postal station where Roman sent his things in unmarked envelopes. Inside, along with a note written in a trembling hand, was a flash drive, and on it the unthinkable. Recordings. Recordings of calls between Julian and various politicians, police officers, and judges. They talked about payments, disappearances, women institutionalized for speaking out. There was even a mention of a child exploitation ring that used clinics as fronts. Isabella couldn't hold back the tears. Roman had given everything. His home, his silence, his life. Matthew looked down. Guilt was etched on his forehead. He died to protect you. He died because Julian can't stand not being in control. But this is going to sink him. They began to compile the material, to organize it into segments. The documentary had to be ready soon, but the pressure was a stalking beast, and it didn't take long to attack. That same night, upon returning to her room, Isabella found the door broken. Everything was ransacked. The bed was slashed with a knife. The computer was destroyed. A word was written in black paint on the mirror. Soon. Matthew called the police, although he knew it was useless. They pretended to investigate, but seeing there were no witnesses, they closed the case as an attempted robbery with insufficient evidence. No one asked about the threat. Isabella no longer slept. She and Matthew took turns keeping watch. They ate little, living on high alert. Meanwhile, at St. Gabriel's clinic, Charlotte was still drugged. The new medication was stronger. She saw blurry. Sometimes she forgot her own name, but her rage kept her sane. A young nurse, with a kind look, began to leave her notes in the pocket of her patient uniform. Short phrases on a lined paper. "I'm still here. I'm going to get you out. Hold on." It was Matthew. He had infiltrated using a false identity as a new resident doctor. One Thursday night, he took advantage of a lapse in security and snuck Charlotte out on a gurney covered with a sheet. No one checked. The ambulance he used was stolen with altered plates. When they arrived at the safe house where Isabella was, she received her with a hug that broke years of pain. Charlotte's eyes were sunken, her skin pale, her movements clumsy, but she recognized her. "I say, you're alive," Isabella cried. "I swear, he tried to kill me and he locked me up. He drugged me. He took my voice." "Not anymore." Charlotte collapsed in her arms. "He buried us alive, ISA, but he didn't know that roots under the ground also bloom. They spent weeks in hiding." The documentary material was saved on 5 different hard drives, one in each city in the country. They called it Voices That Don't Shut Up. The editing was almost finished. Launch day would be a live broadcast from an encrypted account backed by international servers. No one could stop it, but Julian was one step ahead. One afternoon, while Matthew went out to get groceries, 2 men ambushed him. They hit him in the head, dragged him into a black van. When he woke up, he was in a dark room, tied to a chair, bleeding from his forehead. Julian was watching him from a corner. "You thought I wouldn't find out." Matthew spat out blood. "I'm not afraid of you." "You should be, because you don't have a son I can hurt." "She does." Matthew tried to move, but the rope cut into his wrists. "If you don't tell me where the material is, Sebastian will pay for your mistakes." The silence became thick. Julian looked at him with a murderous calm. "I'll take him to the same woods where I tried to kill his mother. This time I won't fail." Matthew gritted his teeth. "You won't touch him. Then talk." Matthew didn't, but he knew the clock had started ticking. And if Isabella didn't move soon, Julian would, with all his fury, with all his malice, with the power of someone who believes the truth can be buried. The house was no longer in the shadows. Now it was in the full light of day, and blood was about to be spilled. Isabella knew it. She could feel it in the trembling of her fingers, in the permanent knot in her chest, in the way the wind seemed to scream every time she approached a window. Julian had Matthew. She knew it, and there was no time. The hunt was no longer silent. It was a roar coming straight for her, and if she didn't do something, she would lose everything again, her sister, her son, herself. Charlotte held her face in her hands. They were in the same room where, days earlier, they had shared their first hug after years of nightmares. Fear surrounded them, but there was something stronger beating between them. "Do it now, ISA. Show them the truth." "We have nothing left to lose," Charlotte said, her voice broken but resolute. Isabella nodded. She took a deep breath, as if about to jump into the void. She opened her laptop, connected the hidden hard drives, and launched the pre-configured program. The fake account, the alternative channel, the hidden links, everything Roman had helped build, everything Matthew risked his life for. The broadcast screen showed a countdown. 5 minutes. Isabella's hands were shaking. She thought of Matthew tied up, of Sebastian playing, unaware of who his mother was, of Julian flying high, believing he was invincible. She thought of all the women whose voices were silenced and clung to one single idea. This time, the truth would not be buried. Charlotte hugged her before it began. For us, and for those who couldn't scream. The broadcast started. The screen went black. A voice spoke. For years, victims were silenced, hidden, called crazy, silenced by a rotten system. I was one of them, and this is my story. The video showed Isabella, or rather Valerie Swanson, sitting in front of the camera. Her face in shadows, her voice firm. She told how she was manipulated by Julian Delano, how she was a victim of psychological violence, how she discovered his network of corruption, how he tried to kill her, and how she survived. Then came the evidence. Leaked recordings, phone conversations with judges, doctors, prosecutors, images of beaten women in psychiatric clinics, video testimonies from mothers with missing daughters, legal documents with forged signatures, photographs of properties bought with laundered money. Stories, names, dates, faces, and then finally, the name Julian Delano. Julian's image appeared on screen, smiling in expensive suits with wine glasses, surrounded by politicians. Behind that smile, the truth. Valerie's voice narrated that this man was responsible for the disappearance of more than 36 women, for forcibly institutionalizing those who dared to speak out, for using clinics to cover up abuses, for stealing her son, and for trying to kill her. The internet exploded. Julian Delano's name trended in a matter of minutes. International news networks shared the video. Independent platforms replicated it. Feminist groups flooded it. The truth could no longer be contained. Isabella, still in front of the computer, had tears streaming down her cheeks. "Roman," she whispered, "we did it." On the other side of the city, in a cold room, Julian smashed a monitor against the wall. "Locate that signal. Shut it down." His technical team tried everything, but the broadcast was already on international servers, impossible to take down. And worse, Interpol had already seen the content. The phone rang. Julian answered, his voice agitated. "Delano. Speak. The airport is closed to you. You have an international warrant for your arrest." The air went out of him. He walked furiously toward the door. He was escorted out by 2 trusted men, but when they reached the private hangar, 5 agents were already waiting for him. "Mr. Delano, you are under arrest for crimes against humanity, abuse of power, money laundering, human trafficking, and attempted murder. This is a mistake. This is a smear campaign against me. That woman is crazy. She's crazy." They handcuffed him. He screamed. He fought. No one listened. This time, his voice was the one that was worth nothing. Meanwhile, in a safe house south of the city, Charlotte watched the news with a mixture of rage and relief. He fell, I say. He finally fell. But Isabella wasn't celebrating. There was something else to do, Sebastian. With the help of Beatrice, Julian's mother, they managed to get to the mansion before the media invaded. Beatrice was waiting for them, the boy ready, his backpack in his hand, not understanding why his grandmother was crying so much. "I'm giving him back to you, Isabella," Beatrice said, her voice trembling. "I was also a victim of that monster. I never had the courage to stop him. But you did. Forgive me." Isabella hugged the woman without a word. Then she knelt in front of the boy. "Hi, my love." Sebastian looked at her, confused. He had seen her face on television. He had heard her voice. Something inside him knew. I'm your mom, Sebastian. I thought you were dead, but every heartbeat of yours was mine. Mommy's here, my love, and I'm never leaving again." The boy hugged her without fully understanding, but he felt it. He felt that this hug was real, that this warmth was his. Days later, Julian was transferred to a maximum security prison. He became the scandal of the century. Politicians resigned, doctors were fired. Lawsuits were opened, and women who had been unjustly confined were released. Isabella, with a new legal identity, became a symbol of resistance. Matthew was released after the operation. When he got out, he reunited with them. The hugs were long, painful, clean. Everything seemed to be settling into a calm. But hell does not so easily let go of those who survived it. In the last scene, inside a damp cell, Julian wrote with an old pen on wrinkled paper. The camera focused on the letter that someone would receive soon. The letters read, "It's not over yet," and he signed it with his blood. Julian closed the envelope with a smile twisted by resentment. The ink mixed with the cut on his finger made the letter look like a ritual threat, as if with it he was invoking something darker than himself. He walked to the small opening in the cell where envelopes were left for review. No one was watching him. They no longer saw him as a threat. His fall had been too public, too loud. The judges felt like heroes for having him imprisoned. The media had already gotten bored, but Julian, in his silence, knew his story was not over. 2 weeks later, that envelope reached its destination. The young man who opened it was in a dark room with the windows covered in old newspapers. The first thing he did was smell the letter, then touch the blood-stained seal, and finally read it in a low voice. His voice trembled with contained emotion. "My father paid with prison. I will pay with fire. Very soon, mother, you will be reunited with hell." His lips curled into a twisted smile. The fire in his eyes was not a metaphor. Meanwhile, miles away, Isabella was breathing clean air for the first time in years. The rural home she had moved into with Sebastian and Charlotte was not in any public records. She had bought it under the name of the foundation she now led, Roots of Freedom. It was a simple wooden house, surrounded by trees, where the singing of birds and the smell of damp earth replaced the city's hustle and bustle. There, Sebastian could run barefoot, shout, and laugh. There, Charlotte could sleep without sedatives, and there, Isabella was finally at peace. Every morning they cooked together. Every afternoon they had video calls with other women who had been part of the documentary. Many of them now worked for the foundation. They gave workshops, provided legal support, and took complaints. The documentary, Voices That Don't Shut Up, continued to travel the world, translated into other languages, replicated in congresses, universities, and forums. Isabella became a symbol, an icon, although she wasn't interested in being a figurehead. She just wanted to heal. That desire to heal led her to the cemetery on a gray Monday. Old Man Roman's tombstone was decorated with wildflowers. Isabella arrived alone with a letter in her hand. It wasn't for him, it was for her. She sat in front of the grave, crossed her legs, and read aloud. "I owed you this, a closure, a beginning. I don't know how to thank someone who gave me everything without asking for anything. You saved my life, you gave me time, you gave me courage. You're not my blood, but you were the only family I had when I needed it most. Today we're doing well." Sebastian is smiling. Charlotte no longer trembles at night, and I'm starting to recognize myself in the mirror. Old Man Roman, wherever you are, thank you. Your fight was not in vain. Now it's ours. She left the letter at the foot of the gravestone. It was raining softly. She didn't move. She felt the silence embrace her. Days later, in the city, a national event was organized to commemorate the impact of Voices That Don't Shut Up. The room was packed. There were cameras, reporters, activists, and diplomats. Isabella walked onto the stage in a navy blue dress, without makeup, her hair down. She wore a white handkerchief tied to her wrist as a symbol of resistance. She took the microphone. There was no music or introduction. She just spoke. "For years I believed I was dead, not from the shot, but from the silence. The real hell isn't violence. It's when no one listens when you scream. They buried me alive, and from that dark ground, I learned that the truth, when you can't scream it, you plant it. The truth can be buried, but it always blossoms like a seed." There was a reverent silence, followed by applause. Some cried, others looked at the floor. The politicians present didn't know how to react. The uncomfortable truth still hit them hard. Isabella left the microphone and walked straight to Sebastian, who was waiting with Charlotte in the audience. "Did I do well?" she asked the boy. "You were amazing, Mom." That night, they celebrated at home with rice pudding. Charlotte made an impromptu toast with apple juice. "To Old Man Roman, to the truth, and to the future," she said. They clinked glasses. They laughed. It was a light, gentle night, as if the world, for once, didn't weigh them down. But in another house, in another city, someone was hanging a photograph on a board. It was an image of Isabella, next to it one of Sebastian, next to it Charlotte, and in the center, written in red ink, a word, debt. The young man closed the curtains, lit a candle, and repeated a phrase as if it were a mantra. "There will be no redemption without vengeance." In the countryside, Isabella looked out the window, not knowing why her chest was trembling, as if the air carried a distant whisper. It wasn't fear, it was instinct. She knew that the truth never dies, but neither does hatred. The echo of the truth could save or warn. And hell doesn't always stay closed.